Close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out gently. Let the noise of the busy world around you completely fade away. Imagine looking up into the velvet night sky, past the drifting clouds, past the glowing lights of your city. There, suspended in the vast, quiet ocean of the cosmos, is the moon, a silent, silver guardian watching over our restless earth. Now, picture a single footprint, perfectly pressed into the grey dust. It has been there for more than half a century. No wind has touched it, no rain has washed it away. It is a striking paradox. On our vibrant planet, a footprint on the beach is erased by the very next tide. Yet, in the silent vacuum of space, a fragile imprint in the dust becomes a monument of eternity. Today we will drift through the absolute quiet of the lunar surface. We will uncover the mesmerizing secrets of why these marks refuse to disappear. I promise that by the end of this immersive journey, your mind will feel as calm, clear, and untroubled as the still, windless plains of the moon. Before we dive into the microscopic mysteries of the lunar dust, let your mind drift back in time. The year is 1969. The Apollo 11 lunar module, named Eagle, descends gracefully through the absolute emptiness of space. Below it lies a pristine, untouched world, a world that has remained frozen in silent meditation for billions of years. When humanity finally touched down, the bright fire of the engine's exhaust blew away the top layer of dust, revealing a surface that had not seen a disturbance since the chaotic, fiery days of the early solar system. Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder, and in that fleeting, quiet moment, history was forged. But to truly understand why that monumental moment is frozen in time forever, we must understand what the moon actually is. It is not just a glowing rock floating in the sky. It is a planetary time capsule. A sanctuary devoid of the dynamic, ever-changing systems that keep our Earth in a constant state of rebirth. Here, there are no skies to bring storms, no oceans to carve canyons, and no living creatures to shift the soil. It is a canvas of profound stillness, waiting patiently for the universe to paint its slow, majestic cosmic masterpiece. The journey into the vacuum. As we gently float away from the blue glow of Earth, the very first thing we notice is the profound, absolute absence of air. On our home planet, we are constantly bathed in a heavy ocean of moving gases. But space is an absolute vacuum. Imagine swimming in a deep pool, feeling the heavy resistance of the water pushing against your skin. That is exactly what our atmosphere does every second of the day. Now imagine stepping out of that pool into a realm of pure, weightless nothingness. A common myth is that space is completely empty, a dark void with absolutely nothing inside it. In reality, it is filled with trace particles, invisible radiation, and vast fields of magnetic energy. But there is no dense medium to carry sound, and no gas to create atmospheric pressure. This absolute silence is the first, gentle guardian of the footprint. Without air, there is simply no pressure to push and pull at the delicate edges of the dust. The footprint sits in a perfect state of suspended animation, endlessly cradled by the quiet of the void. The moment of touchdown. Picture the lunar lander gently approaching the grey surface. As the engine fires, it kicks up a magnificent spray of dust. On Earth, dust billows into beautiful rolling clouds that hang in the air for hours. But let us break a fascinating myth right now. On the moon, dust does not billow. Because there is no air to hold it up, every single particle follows a perfect mathematical arc, falling right back to the ground the instant the engine shuts off. Imagine throwing a handful of sand in a vacuum chamber. It drops instantly, like a heavy stone. This means that once the dust settled around the Apollo landers, it truly settled. There are no lingering clouds, no slow drift of particles gently covering the tracks over time. The instant the dust fell, the canvas was perfectly wiped clean, ready to accept a human imprint that would last for countless millennia. The stillness returned in the blink of an eye. The making of the first step. Imagine the heavy, insulated boot of an astronaut pressing down into the virgin soil. The weight transfers smoothly, compressing the grey powder underneath. On a terrestrial beach, wet sand squishes and molds because of the water tension between the grains. But here there is no moisture. The bright example of this is walking in freshly fallen dry snow on a freezing winter night. You hear that satisfying crunch, and the shape holds perfectly. The lunar soil compresses in a very similar way, but purely due to the unique mechanical locking of its particles in the low gravity. When the boot lifts away, it leaves behind a flawless, three-dimensional cast. Every ridge, every tread, every tiny imperfection of the rubber sole is faithfully reproduced in the dust. The imprint is so sharp, so unimaginably pristine, that it looks as though it was carved from solid grey marble. The physical nature of the soil. What exactly lies beneath our feet? Let us look closer at this alien ground. When we think of dust, we naturally picture the soft, rolling dunes of a warm earth desert, gently shaped by the caress of the wind. But let us dispel a major myth right now. Lunar soil, scientifically known as regolith, is nothing like the soft sand on Earth. It is not smooth. It is not gentle. Picture, if you will, millions of microscopic, razor-sharp shards of shattered glass. When a micrometeorite strikes the moon, the immense heat instantly melts the rock, spraying tiny droplets of liquid glass that freeze in the vacuum before they even hit the ground. Because there is no wind or water to tumble and smooth these particles over millions of years, their edges remain incredibly jagged. This jagged, interlocking texture is the exact reason why footprints hold their shape so flawlessly. The sharp edges of the regolith lock together under the weight of the boot, acting more like a puzzle of crushed volcanic rock. The absolute absence of wind. Breathe in deeply and imagine standing in a vast, open desert where the air is perfectly, eternally still. On Earth, wind is the great eraser of history. A gentle breeze can sweep away a footprint in a matter of minutes. Wind is born from the uneven heating of an atmosphere by a star. But the moon has no atmosphere to heat. There are no thermal updrafts, no gentle breezes, and no howling gales. Imagine a grand, majestic flag placed on a high mountain peak. On Earth, it snaps and flutters furiously. On the moon, the American flags planted by the astronauts hang perfectly motionless, held up only by a horizontal wire. The myth that the flags were blowing in the wind during the Apollo broadcasts is simply an illusion caused by the astronauts twisting the flagpole into the dirt. Once they let go, the fabric froze in place, just like the footprints beneath it. The total lack of wind guarantees an eternal, undisturbed peace. The missing touch of water. Think of a gentle rain washing over a forest, or a powerful river carving through a deep canyon. Water is the sculptor of our blue planet. It dissolves, it erodes, and it carries the past away into the ocean. But the lunar surface is bone dry. There are no rivers, no clouds, and no gentle morning dew. Some people believe the myth that the moon is entirely devoid of water. While it is true that water ice exists hidden in the deep, permanently shadowed craters of the lunar poles, there is absolutely no liquid water on the sunlit plains where the astronauts walked. Imagine a sandcastle built on a dry, arid plain, far from the reach of any ocean tide. Without the dissolving power of liquid water, the structural integrity of the dust remains totally uncompromised. No raindrops will ever fall to pit the surface. No streams will ever wash the dust away. The footprint remains in a state of eternal dehydration, a perfect fossil in the void. The fierce heat of the lunar day. As the sun slowly rises over the lunar horizon, the landscape is bathed in a blinding, unfiltered light. Without an atmospheric blanket to scatter the rays, the transition from darkness to light is instant and severe. The temperature on the surface skyrockets to a boiling 250 degrees Fahrenheit or 120 degrees Celsius. Imagine standing in the heart of an industrial oven. You might think this extreme heat would cause the soil to shift, expand, or degrade. But the lunar dust is an incredible insulator. The bright example is holding a piece of space shuttle thermal tile. It can be glowing red hot on one side and perfectly cool to the touch on the other. The very top millimeter of the footprint absorbs this intense solar radiation, but the shape remains stubbornly intact. The heat merely bakes the dust in place, endlessly repeating a cycle of thermal stress that the tough, glassy shards easily endure. The freezing depths of the lunar night. When the sun finally dips below the curved horizon, the light vanishes instantly. There is no twilight, there is no lingering dusk. The darkness is absolute, and the temperature plummets to a bone-chilling -208 degrees Fahrenheit or -130 degrees Celsius. Imagine a winter so cold that the very air itself would freeze solid. This dramatic swing from boiling day to freezing night happens every lunar month. A common myth is that this extreme temperature fluctuation causes massive thermal expansion and contraction that would crumble the footprint. While rocks on the moon do slowly crack over millions of years due to thermal stress, the fine, powdery regolith is already completely shattered. The tiny grains simply contract infinitesimally, locking their jagged edges even tighter together in the dark. The freezing night acts as a deep cryogenic sleep, preserving the astronaut's mark in a cold, silent embrace. The illusion of perfect shadows. Let us look at the visual beauty of these footprints. Because there is no atmosphere to scatter the light, the shadows on the moon are unlike anything we see on Earth. On our planet, shadows are soft, filled with ambient light bouncing off the sky and the surroundings. On the moon, a shadow is a realm of absolute, pitch-black darkness. Imagine shining a bright flashlight on a deeply textured painting in a pitch-black room. The contrast is incredibly stark. The ridges of the footprint cast long, jagged shadows that define its shape with high-definition clarity. This means that as the sun moves slowly across the black sky, the footprint seems to transform, its deep valleys plunging into complete darkness, while its peaks shine brilliantly in the raw sunlight. This perfect play of light and shadow makes the footprint look fresh, as if it was made only seconds ago rather than decades. The gentle grip of low gravity. Let your body relax and imagine weighing only 1/6 of what you weigh right now. You feel incredibly light, floating with every slow, deliberate step. The moon's gravity is wonderfully weak compared to Earth's. You might assume that lower gravity would make the dust loose and unstable, prone to collapsing back into the footprint's depression. But let us debunk this myth. The low gravity actually works perfectly in tandem with the jagged, interlocking shapes of the dust particles. Because there is less downward force pulling the peaks of the footprint apart, the steep, near-vertical walls of the boot tread can stand taller and firmer than they ever could on Earth. Imagine building a tower out of dry sand. On Earth, it quickly slumps under its own weight. On the moon, that same tower stands proud and tall, gracefully defying the gentle downward pull. The footprint is a microscopic architectural marvel, held together by the perfect balance of friction and low gravity. The slow rain of micrometeorites. While the moon seems perfectly still, it is actually under a constant invisible siege. Space is filled with tiny, dust-sized particles traveling at astronomical speeds. These are micrometeorites. Because the moon has no protective atmosphere to burn them up like Earth does with shooting stars, every single one of these tiny specks impacts the surface. Imagine standing in a slow, eternal drizzle, but instead of water, it is microscopic grains of sand traveling at thousands of miles per hour. This is the only true form of erosion on the lunar surface. A common myth is that a large asteroid impact will eventually destroy the Apollo landing sites. While possible, space is vast, and large impacts are incredibly rare. The real eraser is this slow, invisible rain. When a micrometeorite hits near a footprint, it kicks up a tiny splash of dust. Over millions of years, these microscopic splashes will gently soften the crisp edges of the tread. The timeline of eternal preservation. So, how long will it actually take for the micrometeorite rain to wash away the footprints? Let your mind expand to comprehend deep geological time. On Earth, human artifacts disappear in a few centuries. Wood rots, iron rusts, and concrete crumbles. But on the Moon, the rate of erosion is almost incomprehensibly slow. Scientists estimate that it takes about 1 million years to erode just a few millimeters of lunar regolith. Imagine a grand hourglass, but each grain of sand takes 1,000 years to fall. At this incredibly gentle pace, the deep ridges of Neil Armstrong's boot print will remain clearly recognizable for 10 to 100 million years. Long after our cities have turned to dust, long after the continents of Earth have drifted and reshaped, these simple, humble marks in the lunar soil will still be there. They are arguably the most permanent physical legacy humanity has ever created. The invisible breath of the sun. There is another deeply subtle force at play in the vacuum. The sun is not just a source of light and heat, it also constantly breathes out a stream of charged particles known as the solar wind. On Earth, our beautiful magnetic field deflects this deadly radiation, creating the mesmerizing auroras. But the Moon has no global magnetic shield. The solar wind strikes the surface directly. Imagine a gentle, constant stream of invisible energy washing over the landscape. This creates a process called sputtering. As high-energy protons from the sun hit the lunar dust, they literally knock individual atoms off the surface rocks. It is erosion on a subatomic level. Some people believe the myth that solar radiation will quickly bleach and disintegrate the footprint. While the solar wind does alter the chemistry of the very top layer, the physical removal of material is so unfathomably slow that it poses no immediate threat to the shapes carved in the dust. The transformation of the soil. As the solar wind and cosmic rays constantly bombard the lunar surface, they slowly change the very nature of the dust. This process is known as space weathering. Imagine taking a shiny, bright piece of silver and leaving it out in the air until it slowly develops a dark, protective patina. The lunar dust undergoes a similar, yet far more exotic transformation. Over millions of years, the radiation causes the iron trapped within the glassy particles to separate into microscopic, pure metal droplets. This darkens the soil, giving the Moon its characteristic muted, grayish-brown hue. The bright example here is the contrast between the footprints and the surrounding undisturbed soil. By stepping on the dust, the astronauts exposed slightly lighter, unweathered material from just beneath the surface. This subtle difference in color contrast helps the footprints stand out even more brilliantly against the ancient, weathered landscape around them. The dynamic contrast of Earth. To truly appreciate the eternal stillness of the Moon, we must turn our gaze back to our vibrant home. Earth is a restless, breathing entity. Our planet is driven by a fiery, molten core that constantly moves giant tectonic plates. We have towering volcanoes that build new land, and deep subduction zones that consume the old. Imagine a master painter who is never satisfied, constantly wiping the canvas clean to start anew. A beautiful myth is that our planet perfectly preserves the deep past. In truth, Earth is a brilliant recycler. Almost all of the original surface from our planet's birth has been destroyed, folded back into the mantle. The Moon, however, is geologically dead. Its core cooled long ago. The magnificent craters and vast lava plains we see today have been frozen in place for billions of years. By walking on the Moon, humanity stepped onto a museum floor that the universe itself had perfectly preserved. A journey to the red planet. Let us stretch our imagination even further and travel to our neighboring world, Mars. Could footprints last forever there? Mars is a desert world, a place of red sand and towering volcanoes. But unlike the Moon, Mars has a thin, dynamic atmosphere. Imagine standing on a rusty dune, feeling a cold, thin breeze brushing against your spacesuit. Mars is famous for its colossal dust storms, some so massive they envelop the entire planet in a hazy amber glow. Let us dispel the myth that everything in space lasts forever. If an astronaut left a footprint in the Martian dust, it would not survive the ages. The persistent Martian winds, though thin, are highly effective at moving fine particles. Within a few weeks, or perhaps a few years at most, the howling red winds would sweep the tracks away, smoothing the dunes back into their natural, pristine state. The Moon's lack of wind is a rare, precious gift. The crushing weight of Venus. Let us drift inwards toward the Sun, to the blazing world of Venus. This planet is often called Earth's evil twin. Imagine a world entirely hidden beneath thick, swirling clouds of sulfuric acid. If you were to step onto the surface of Venus, the experience would be terrifyingly brief. The atmosphere here is so incredibly dense that the pressure is equivalent to being a mile underwater in Earth's deep oceans. A footprint left here would be instantly subjected to super hurricane-force winds at altitude, though the surface winds are slow but incredibly dense. The bright example is trying to leave a footprint in heavy, flowing mud at the bottom of a rushing river. Furthermore, the extreme heat, hot enough to easily melt lead, softens the very rocks over time. Any mark left by human exploration on Venus would be crushed, melted, and swept away in a geological blink of an eye. The Moon remains our only true, lasting sanctuary. The sun-scorched plains of Mercury. Now let us fly even closer to the intense fire of the Sun, arriving at the tiny, cratered world of Mercury. At first glance, Mercury looks astonishingly similar to our Moon. It is heavily cratered, grey, and utterly devoid of a substantial atmosphere. You might easily believe the myth that footprints on Mercury would last just as long as they do on the Moon. However, Mercury's proximity to the Sun changes the equation. The daytime temperatures here are so extreme that they far exceed those on the Moon. Over vast stretches of time, the intense solar radiation and the dramatic thermal expansion of the rocks cause a slow, gradual smoothing of the surface. While a footprint on Mercury would undoubtedly outlast one on Earth by millions of years, the relentless, scorching breath of the nearby Sun would eventually erase it faster than the gentle, distant quiet of our lunar companion. The icy moons of the outer solar system. Let your mind drift outward now, past the asteroid belt, to the giant, swirling gas planets. Here we find moons made almost entirely of ice, like Jupiter's Europa or Saturn's Enceladus. Imagine walking across a perfectly smooth, endless plain of deep frozen water, illuminated by the faint, distant light of the Sun. If an astronaut left a boot print in the frost here, how long would it last? These moons are incredibly cold, but they are not entirely dead. Many of them are constantly stretched and squeezed by the immense gravity of their parent planets, creating deep subsurface oceans and active ice volcanoes. A bright example is a glacier on Earth slowly creeping and fracturing over time. The icy surfaces of these moons are constantly shifting, cracking, and resurfacing themselves with fresh water from below. A footprint left on Europa would eventually be swallowed by the shifting ice, lost to the deep, dark, alien ocean. The eternal stillness of distant exoplanets. Now let us leave our solar system entirely. Imagine soaring across the breathtaking starry void to an exoplanet orbiting a distant red dwarf star. The universe is filled with countless rocky worlds. If we find a planet that, like our Moon, has lost its atmosphere and its internal heat, we will find another eternal canvas. Imagine a world that is tidally locked to its star, one side forever baking in endless day, the other side frozen in perpetual night. A common myth in science fiction is that all planets have swirling clouds and weather, but the galaxy is full of silent, airless rocks. If a future explorer leaves a footprint on one of these distant exoplanets, it will share the same glorious fate as those on our Moon. It will become a cosmic fossil, waiting silently in the dark from millions of years, a testament that life once passed through that forgotten corner of the galaxy. The sprawling tracks of the lunar rovers. While the footprints are deeply poetic, they are not the only marks we left behind. During the later Apollo missions, astronauts brought along a remarkable piece of engineering, the Lunar Roving Vehicle. Imagine a skeletal, wire-wheeled car silently bouncing across the grey landscape in low gravity. The astronauts drove these rovers for miles, exploring deep craters and vast plains. The tires of these rovers were not made of soft rubber, which would have cracked in the extreme cold, but of woven piano wire. This brilliant design left a very distinct, beautiful mesh pattern pressed deep into the dust. These rover tracks stretch out like long, winding ribbons across the magnificent desolation. Just like the footprints, these miles of tracks remain perfectly intact today. They are an intricate road network on another world, sitting completely undisturbed, waiting for a future generation to travel their silent paths once again. The abandoned architecture of exploration. As we float gracefully above the landing sites, we see more than just marks in the dust. We see the silent, glittering monuments of human ingenuity. When the astronauts prepared to return to Earth, they had to shed as much weight as possible to escape the moon's gravity. They left behind a surreal, beautiful museum of artifacts. Imagine seeing the gold foil-wrapped descent stage of the lunar module, sitting perfectly still in the void. Surrounding it are discarded life support backpacks, specialized cameras, and specialized tools. There is a common myth that all space junk eventually burns up. But on the moon, there is no atmosphere to incinerate these items. These objects sit exactly where they were gently dropped. They do not rust. They do not decay. They simply wait, bathed in the slow, eternal cycle of light and shadow, serving as a permanent exhibition of humanity's greatest adventure. The curious artifacts of human spirit. Among the heavy scientific equipment, there are smaller, deeply personal items resting in the dust, adding a touch of humanity to the cold void. Imagine a small, beautifully framed family photograph left by astronaut Charlie Duke, neatly sealed in a plastic bag. Or the two pristine golf balls, confidently struck by Alan Shepard, resting quietly in a grey crater. There is even a small, majestic silicon disc carrying messages of peace from the leaders of Earth. One of the most fascinating examples is the metal hammer and the delicate falcon feather dropped by David Scott to brilliantly prove Galileo's theory that in a vacuum, objects of different masses fall at the exact same speed. Because there is no wind to blow the feather away, it still lies right next to the hammer. These deeply human touches transform the barren lunar landscape into a warm, relatable testament to our curious, playful, and exploring nature. The fate of the American flags. As we gaze upon the landing sites, one image stands out prominently in our minds: the bright red, white, and blue of the American flag. But what do those flags look like today, after decades in the harsh environment of space? Let us break a widely held myth. Many believe the flags still stand proud and colorful. In reality, the relentless, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation from the sun has severely bleached the nylon fabric. Imagine leaving a brightly colored shirt outside in the blazing summer sun for 50 years. Today, those historic flags are completely bone white. Furthermore, the intense thermal cycling from boiling days to freezing nights has likely caused the brittle fabric to slowly disintegrate. While the footprints perfectly survived the test of time, the flags, made of delicate earthly materials, surrender to the harsh reality of the cosmic environment, transforming into fragile, ghostly white markers in the eternal dark. The subtle tremors from within. We have established that the moon is geologically dead, but it is not entirely silent. Deep within its interior, a faint heartbeat still echoes. These are known as moonquakes. Unlike earthquakes, which are caused by grinding tectonic plates, moonquakes are primarily triggered by the gravitational pull of the Earth, slowly stretching and squeezing the lunar interior. Imagine a very deep, incredibly faint rumble vibrating through the solid rock. A myth is that these quakes are strong enough to collapse craters and erase footprints. In truth, most moonquakes are so incredibly gentle that a human standing on the surface would barely feel them. While they can cause tiny, localized landslides on incredibly steep crater walls over millions of years, the flat plains where the astronauts walked remain blissfully unaffected. The subtle vibrations simply pass through the dust, leaving the historic imprints perfectly and entirely undisturbed. The mesmerizing dance of levitating dust. While the footprints themselves remain still, there is a strangely beautiful, almost magical phenomenon that occurs nearby at the edge of light and dark. As the intense sunlight hits the lunar surface at dawn, it bombards the dust with harsh ultraviolet radiation. This knocks electrons away, giving the microscopic particles a strong positive electrical charge. Because particles with the same charge repel each other, the very top layer of the lunar dust actually lifts off the ground, softly levitating a few inches in the void. Imagine a faint, glowing mist of floating glass particles shimmering across the terminator line, the boundary between day and night. This delicate electrostatic dance is a bright example of the moon's hidden, dynamic beauty. Yet this levitation is so incredibly weak and localized to the microscopic top layer that it does not possess the power to blur or erase the deep, heavy compressions made by the astronaut boots. The looming threat of future explorers. The greatest danger to the permanence of these footprints does not come from micrometeorites, solar winds, or deep moonquakes. It comes from us. As humanity prepares to return to the moon, we face a new era of lunar exploration. Imagine massive, heavy spacecraft descending from the sky, carrying tourists, miners, and new scientists. The exhaust from a modern heavy lander is exponentially more powerful than the Apollo engines. A major myth is that space is so vast we could never accidentally destroy these sites. But a heavy landing even miles away could kick up a fierce, horizontal storm of razor-sharp dust. This artificial sandstorm would easily scour the landscape, completely sandblasting the delicate footprints and historic artifacts. The silence that protected these marks for half a century could be shattered in a single moment by the roaring engines of our own triumphant return to the stars. The creation of cosmic sanctuaries. How do we protect the most important archaeological sites in human history from our own progress? The answer lies in careful international cooperation. Space agencies around the world are now working to establish strict guidelines for lunar heritage preservation. Imagine invisible, protective bubbles drawn around the Apollo landing sites, legally designated as the first extraterrestrial national parks. Future spacecraft will be strictly forbidden from flying over or landing within these protective zones to prevent the destructive spray of high-velocity dust. The bright example is how we protect delicate ancient cave paintings on Earth, using barriers and strict rules to prevent human breath and touch from destroying the fragile pigments. By actively choosing to respect and protect these silent monuments in the dust, we show that humanity values its history just as much as its future, ensuring the footprints remain untouched for generations to come. The footprint as a timeless museum. Let your mind zoom out, visualizing the entire moon hanging in the dark expanse of space. These tiny gray footprints are more than just depressions in the dirt. They are the ultimate symbol of life reaching beyond its origins. For billions of years, the universe expanded, stars exploded, and planets formed in absolute silence, devoid of any conscious observer. Then, on a small blue planet, life arose. It learned to look up, it learned to dream, and eventually, it built machines to cross the terrible void. The footprint is the physical proof that the universe is beginning to explore itself. Imagine a cosmic museum where the only exhibit is a single step taken by a fragile, biological creature in a harsh, unforgiving vacuum. It is a masterpiece of determination. As long as the moon orbits the Earth, that silent grey museum will remain open, holding on to our greatest achievement with an unbreakable, eternal grip. The final gaze back homeward. As our deeply relaxing journey slowly comes to an end, let us stand next to that famous footprint one last time. Look up from the grey, cratered soil into the pitch-black sky. There, hanging like a brilliant, fragile sapphire, is the Earth. Swirling white clouds, deep blue oceans, and the lush green of continents. Down there, everything is moving, everything is changing. People are rushing, winds are blowing, and tides are turning. It is a world of beautiful, chaotic noise. But up here, there is only the deep, comforting, velvet silence. The footprint at your feet belongs to two worlds, created by the dynamic, restless energy of Earth, but perfectly preserved by the eternal, unmoving calm of the moon. Breathe in that profound peace. Let the silence of the vacuum wash over your mind, clearing away your stress and worries, just as the void perfectly cradles the footprints in the endless, beautiful dark. As we gently drift back from the silver surface of the moon, returning to our vibrant, moving Earth, take a final deep breath. Feel the gravity of our home world slowly returning, grounding you in the present moment. We have traveled across the quiet vacuum of space, learned the microscopic secrets of the jagged regolith, and discovered how the absolute stillness of the cosmos protects our history for millions of years. These resilient footprints remind us that while our daily lives may feel chaotic and fleeting, humanity is capable of leaving a beautiful, permanent mark on the universe. Thank you for joining me on this calming journey through the stars. If you found peace in this cosmic exploration, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below. If you could leave one small object next to those eternal footprints on the moon, what would you leave behind?